Good afternoon and welcome to Williams Island TV. I'm really very proud that we're taping today from the new dining room, O'Lear, over at the Island Club. For those of you that were here at the opening, all 700 of you, you realize how magnificent and beautiful this new facility is. It's been literally 5 years in the making, but we've opened it, it's there, and in about 10 days, 2 weeks, everything will be open to the public. It will be open with a pool, the new coconut bar at the pool, O'Lear, the new dining room that we're sitting in now, and all of the facilities. You know, they say it takes a village, and I will tell you there are so many people to thank for this taking place and for this opening. From the construction committee led by John Fells, Richard Burton, Jay Eichel, just amazing the people, how hard they worked on this. George Garcia, leadership of Jeff Klein, our COO, Thomas Bertinelli, who handled the finances for us, EOC, the architect, and then the entire staff, Thaddeus, opening up this entire operation in food and beverage. And normally you have a soft opening when you open a new restaurant facility. Our soft opening was this past week, 700 people. Food, drinks, bar, entertainment. So that's called initiation by fire, and it worked out beautifully. So I want to thank you on behalf of the board, because the board has been so amazing and so much a part of the success of what we've accomplished here. And we're so proud of it. Remember, it's yours. It's for you to use, facilitate, and just have a lot of fun with it. Bring your families here. But I cannot begin to thank all of those people. We have 300 staff members that made this all possible. And without the people that work on Williams Island, we could never have done this. So I want to thank you for all of that. Today you're going to hear a little bit about economics. Larry Thompson, a resident of the 6000 building who's been with us on a number of occasions, deals with the economy. He's an attorney by trade. He'll tell you he's an old country boy, but don't underestimate the old country boy in Larry. We'll talk about tariffs. We'll talk about the effects of the economy. We're going to have some conversation about the events that we've had on the island, and more importantly, some of the events that we have coming up. People are asking what's next. So just very briefly, as you may or may not remember, at our initial board meeting that we had the first of the year, we prepared to have an additional $10 million of capital expenditures over the next 5 years to improve other facilities on the island. Those other facilities will be starting and beginning this year. This year we're starting to do the new playground, which will be on the Triangle. We will be building a sports park and a sports court. We will be putting in a 9-hole putting green. We'll be redoing the dog park and putting AstroTurf down to ensure that it's safe for the dogs and it's less maintenance. We will be putting in a padel court, 2 padel courts as a matter of fact. And then sometime the end of this year or early next year, we will start the renovation and redesign of our spa. And that will just not be furniture and fixtures, but we are repurposing all of the space to make it more friendly, more usable, and more functional. So I just want to tell you that this is just the beginning. We have no assessments planned. Financially, the island is as strong as it's been in years. We have met our reserve study needs. We have plenty of money in the bank. And I'm not bragging, but I want to thank our finance committee. And I want to thank Thomas again for being the leader of the finances of this island. But I want to thank you, the residents, because without you, we are not an island and we're a family here. And as you saw, if you were at the opening, everybody had a wonderful time. Everyone enjoyed it. And it's really your living room. It's your dining room. It's your playground. Enjoy it very much. And we'll be right back. Good afternoon and welcome back to Williams Island TV. By the way, just in case you're not aware of where we are now in the new dining room called O'Lear. That's in the new clubhouse. We had our grand opening last week and it was amazing. We had close to 700 people attend. And then this weekend we had our first Passover Seder here. We had 200 people for that. We have our ribbon breaking, which is going to be this week, ribbon cutting. And then we also have Easter Sunday buffet coming up in the island. And then sometime the first week in May, all the facilities on the island will open up. But it is absolutely beautiful. In fact, when we're finished here with the taping, just possibly I can convince the TV crew to take you outside a little bit and show you a little bit of the pool area, the surroundings, because it's really quite sensational. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But with what's going on with the economy of the world today, there are so many questions that are left unanswered, not because people don't want to give an answer to it, but more importantly, because it's so complicated. What's going on with the intricacies of how tariffs affects and doesn't affect. This past week, we had an issue where there could have been a catastrophe with the bond market. Then you have the interest rates. So the feds lower them. Do they keep them the same? Is the inflation going up? Is it going down? Are prices going up? So we have to have a resident, Larry Thompson, that lives on the island with us. I'm not going to even attempt to give you his resume because it's so impressive and so extensive. I'd rather Larry give us a little bit about what he does, but I will say he's an extremely prominent attorney. He's a prominent economist, and he speaks all over the world about economy. We are not here politically. This is not a Republican or a Democrat personality. This is not a Democrat or Republican opinion. This is just the basics of economy and how some of these things that are going on in the economy of the world today will affect you and I as the consumer. So let me introduce you to Larry. And Larry lives with us in the 6000 building. And we always love to have our residents come on because it shows you the quality, the intellect, and the personalities of the people that are our neighbors that we never really get to know much about. So Larry, I'd rather you tell us a little about your background because when I try to do it, I never get it right.
Okay, I'll be happy to talk about my background. I'm a lawyer by training, as Bob mentioned earlier. I went to University of California at Berkeley Law School. Before that, I was an undergrad at Yale, and I was an English major. And I studied under A. Bartlett Giamatti. I worked at a small company called the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation.
Small company?
Small company.
Small company.
When I say small, we only had about 3,500 employees and another 1,500 part-time employees. So we had full-time equivalents of about 5,000 employees. But what the company did, just to give you some idea, is the company really was focused on the clearance and settlement of securities transactions here in the U.S. as well as globally. And what it did was it cleared all of the trades that were on the New York Stock Exchange as well as the NASDAQ. But it also handled all of the muni bond trades that were traded here in the U.S. It also handled all of the commercial paper transactions here in the U.S. So altogether, we did about $2.3 quadrillion value of securities transactions in an average year. To give you some idea of what that is, 1 quadrillion is a 1 with 19 zeros. In other words, it's 1,000 trillion. To give you some idea of the scope and the magnitude of what the depository
every trade that took place around the world on the exchange.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mainly.
If it was a security that was registered on the NASDAQ or on the New York Stock Exchange, we cleared that trade in some fashion. And because of our nature of what we did, we also did ADRs. And ADRs are an international mechanism that allows stocks that are registered in other countries to be actually traded here in the U.S. So we handled ADRs for, I think, about 250 countries around the world.
So you had to, aside from being an attorney, you had to be well-versed in economy, the economic factors of all this.
I'm not an economist. I've never trained to be an economist, and I don't hold a degree in economics. I am just an old country lawyer from South Carolina.
Old country lawyer
From South Carolina.
who happens to speak around the country about what you don't speak about, economy.
Well, I spoke about what we did for CNN, for CNBC, for Bloomberg. I talked about the company and what the company did and how that would help out the U.S. capital markets. The U.S. has got the most fully developed capital markets of any country in the world. And New York is the financial capital of the United States. And of course, being that we were headquartered at the time for most of my career, we were headquartered in Lower Manhattan, and we had a vault at 55 Water Street on Lower Manhattan. We were in the thick of the capital markets. And of course, we helped grease the capital markets. So when 9/11 occurred, and the New York Stock Exchange, as you may recall, didn't have trading for a week, we had to clear all of the trades that were backlogged before the New York Stock Exchange could open. And we did that. I actually brought in 500 of our employees. We bussed them in. We met at a central location in Lower Manhattan.
So let me interrupt you because I'm not sure most people, and I don't know, I'm sure either. When you say clearing the trade, you have a buyer and a seller.
You do.
What does clearing that trade actually mean?
It means that you have to be certain that the number of shares is the same, the parties are the same, and you want to be certain that, both sides are matching, because what happens is DTCC, my company, became the buyer for the seller and the seller to the buyer. So we guaranteed the trade. We would actually stand behind every trade that was made. And if that trade wasn't handled or was not finished by the actual parties, we would use our guarantee to back that up.
So how did a country boy attorney get to Wall Street and become this clearinghouse?
Well, I didn't become the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse was before me. But I started my legal career as an associate at Davis Polk and Wardwell, which you may know, Bob, was a very large white shoe law firm on Wall Street. John W. Davis, who was the founder of the law firm, was the Solicitor General of the United States during the 1920s. He actually argued more cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court than any Solicitor General in the history of the United States. He also argued Brown versus Board of Education on the losing side. He actually argued it for the state of South Carolina, my home state, and they gave him only a silver platter.
That was it.
As his little token for that. But John W. Davis, besides being, and this is not a political discussion, even though I'm a registered Republican, just so everybody's clear about where I stand on matters. I'm a registered Republican, always have been, always will be. But John W. Davis believed in segregation. So when he went home to talk to his stable boy, who, by the way, had the name John, and I know this because there was a senior partner at Davis Polk when I was a young associate who told me this story. And because the firm itself did not want Davis to argue Brown versus Board of Education. As you may recall, and I know that you are trained in law as well as I am, that there was a history of cases in higher education where separate but equal had already lost. These were college cases. These were cases in high school around the country. So there was a feeling that the Supreme Court was not going to uphold, as they did in Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. That in fact they were going to use Brown as a way to change that law. And of course they did. The only thing that happened was, as you may recall, was the then sitting Chief Justice died midway through the term. And he was replaced by a fellow who happened to be the governor of California, a very famous governor, in fact. And that governor decided that he wanted all 9 judges to decide the case, and he wanted a unanimous decision because he thought it would have more power that way. And so he spoke to all of the justices who dissented, and there were 4 of them, to get them to concur in their decision. And they concurred, but they wanted some language put in that they wanted the state of South Carolina to be comfortable with. And that language was, with all deliberate speed, you would have desegregation disappear in the United States. All deliberate speed. The key to that was all deliberate speed would have meant, had I stayed in my home state of South Carolina, would have meant that I would have graduated from a segregated high school with an all-black high school, not a high school that had whites, blacks, Jews, Gentiles, and other religions involved in it. Because I went to Bronx Science, as you know, Bob. So that's my background.
So let me ask you, as a preamble before we get into inflation, tariffs, etc. A friend of mine used to have 2 seats on the New York Stock Exchange. And at one point they were worth X, and then of course they drop. About a year ago, a friend of mine invited me to go to the exchange floor. And other than the fact that Jim Cramer was doing his morning TV show there, and some people would stand up when they ring the bell, there was not a soul on the floor to speak of. And years back when I would go down there, you couldn't walk. And of course, obviously, a lot of it has to do with electronic trading.
Of course.
But the other factor is, when did the market split off into the New York, the NASDAQ, the S&P, the Dow? And what does all that mean? Because a lot of people don't understand the differences. They say, oh, the Dow went up X, but yet the NASDAQ went down, the S&P is this. What does each one represent in terms of the definition?
Well, let's first talk about the exchanges.
Yeah.
The exchanges are the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ.
Correct.
Those are the 2 key exchanges. There was a third exchange called the American Stock Exchange. The American Stock Exchange basically was absorbed by the New York Stock Exchange in, I would say, the 1980s. When it slowly was absorbed by the New York Stock Exchange, you went away. The Dow and the S&P are basically groups of stocks that are measures that are used as measuring sticks in terms of how well the market is doing. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and that's all it is. It's just an average of those stocks. The S&P 500 is the 500 largest stocks and companies in the U.S. Most people should buy, if they're going to invest, the S&P 500, buy it on, I would probably buy it on Vanguard, which I think the symbol is VOO, or better known as QQQ, and just hold it. I mean, I think Warren Buffett once said that if you're going to invest in anything in the market, you should buy the S&P 500, put it aside, and go to sleep. Come back 35 years later, and you'll be a very wealthy man or woman. So that's what I would recommend to anybody who wants to get involved in the marketplace.
But there were different types of stocks on each one of those categories.
That's true.
Like if you look at the NASDAQ, you have the Amazons, the Teslas, the Magnificent Seven, as we call them, NASDAQ. Then the Dow is the 30 industrials. And then you have the S&P, which is let's call it a mix of all of the above. But what was the reasoning for that split in titles, let's say?
There was no rhyme or reason. It sort of happened because people wanted measures of how well they were doing with their stock market and with the exchanges that were doing it. So the Dow got started, basically the Dow Jones Industrial got started as a measurement for how well the New York Stock Exchange was doing. And they wanted to look at their 30 top stocks. And that's what you see the measurement in.
Correct.
The S&P 500, on the other hand, looks at a much broader group of stocks, 500 in total, of the largest stocks in the marketplace who have a market value generally of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's basically what it all came from.
Okay. So let's get down to this I find very interesting. About a week ago, I guess it is. Of course, we had that crazy week where it went up 2,800 points, then went down 1,100 points, and these crazy swings. During the course of that, prior to the announcement that he was going to, let's say, delay for 90 days, immediate thought would have been to stop the market from falling or to stop the market from turning into a recession vehicle. Yet, in reading Bloomberg, it was primarily because of the bond market that was more dangerous at the time, that could have hurt the world more so than the stocks. What was meant by that?
Well, I mean, what people forget is there is the stock market, and then there's something called the real economy.
Right.
The real economy is what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
That's the banking world. That's banks making investments, banks lending out money. It's what I do right now. I'm also the chairman of the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York. That's one of the things that I do.
As a country boy.
As a country boy.
Yeah, I understand that.
So as a country boy who is involved in various things, the market that we really want to focus on is the bond market, because the bond market has a direct effect on interest rates and on whether or not banks are going to feel comfortable, because if you go into a recession, banks are going to hoard their money. They're not going to be willing to lend money to the players in the economy, such as small banks, other companies, small industrial companies that really are the major hirers of most of the individuals that we're talking about who are part of the real economy. So, if the tariffs that Donald Trump was talking about went into broad effect, as he said they would initially, you saw what happened. The market tanked. The market went down, I think, on one day by a percentage point of close to 10%. And that, of course, wiped out a lot of 401ks. It also wiped out a lot of retirement plans of individuals, but also of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of companies, although they did away with them, still have some defined benefit plans. And by defined benefit plans, what I mean are those plans pay you a defined benefit, and they're mostly invested in stocks and bonds. Usually the ratio is 60% stocks, 40% bonds. That's the general ratio, but that ratio can change depending on...
It's the risk tolerance of the
risk tolerance of the investors who are investing in that, and whoever you pick. You might choose Mario Gabelli, a very famous investor, to handle your stocks. Or you might give it to Barron, who invests heavily in Tesla, to handle your stocks. Or you might just follow the S&P 500 and just do a simulation of the S&P 500
All right,
for
but
your investment.
so when this whole mess happened, and he made the statement that 130 countries are going to have these tariffs put in from 100% to 10%, whatever the numbers are is irrelevant for the moment. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. Let me rephrase that. My understanding is that a tariff is, for a better word, a tax.
It is.
So if you buy a car in Japan and it comes to this country and it's a 25% tariff, that price is going up by 25%.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, a percentage.
It will go up as a percentage. It may not go up by 25%.
Say 10%.
It may go up by 10% because it depends.
But whatever the percentage it goes up, whatever that item goes up, we as a consumer are going to incur that expense.
That's
because
correct.
the dealer isn't going to absorb a loss, so they have to pass that expense on to us. So if in fact all these tariffs go into effect, and I see, like as an example, one of the tariffs that was delayed by 90 days or whatever was on phones and certain chips. Because obviously if Apple's phone all of a sudden has this tremendous tariff, instead of spending $1,000 for a phone, we're going to spend $1,600 for the same phone. And the consumers obviously will affect that. The question then becomes, it's to me obvious that if there's a tariff worldwide on all of these countries, on all of these goods coming in, and we are going to increase our cost to buy these items by whatever the percentage is, whether it's 2%, 10%, it's irrelevant. That has to then relate to inflation again.
Yes, it will.
Exactly. And if that's the case, then the next step would be in that process, would the feds be able to reduce interest to help the economy or raise interest to offset for this problem that's happening? That's the complexity of this formula. People don't realize that a tariff is nothing more than affecting our ability to buy whatever it is we're buying. But deeper than that is, how does it affect inflation and the interest rates that the feds have to do? Because now it's a juggling act.
It is. An interesting thing about that is I recently saw an editorial that quoted Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan hated tariffs,
Yes,
as you
I remember
know.
that. Yeah.
He gave a very famous speech where he said he would never endorse anyone who talked about tariffs because, in his judgment, tariffs were a tax on the consumer. And that's exactly what you just finished saying, Bob. A tariff is nothing but a tax on the consumer, be it 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, or 10%. It's a tax on the consumer,
Exactly.
and it will raise inflation. So as I think we've all seen, every country that we have raised our tariffs on have raised their tariffs on the U.S., especially China. China has now got effectively 134% tariff on all U.S. goods or goods going to the U.S. They're charging 134%, except for those that have been exempted from it, such as Apple with the Apple phone and other
Chips, yeah.
and chips, such as NVIDIA. NVIDIA's chips have been excluded as well because Taiwan is being taxed at a 10% level, which is true of most of the countries in the world. For some reason, our present president, and I'm not trying to talk politics, has always loved tariffs. He started that in his first term back in 2017. He started raising tariffs on other nations, especially China, and he has continued in his present term with raising tariffs. I believe that tariffs are not the way to go because it is a tax on the consumer here in the U.S. And most Republicans, true Republicans, are trade free. We believe in free trade.
Exactly. So the question is, why do people, average America, not understand that this policy, and it's not political policy, forget that a
Economic
tariff
policy.
is going to, no question about it, cost the middle America, average American, a tremendous amount of money to live. Forget eggs. That's minor compared to what's going to happen. I mean, a small example, I'm getting a new computer system for my office, and it's from Dell. And they called me and they said, look, if we don't make the deal by May 1st, I can't tell you what the price of these items are going to be anymore. And it hits home because all of a sudden now it is my pocketbook. But people don't understand. They think a tariff is a charge against the country that you're doing it against. They don't realize we pay the price for that.
Well,
But
that's
the
what Ronald Reagan said, and that's what Warren Buffett have both said.
And that's what Larry Thompson is saying. It's a known fact. You can't not, these companies are not going to lose 143% on a company because they just won't produce. But now what do the feds do? We know this is going to create inflation.
I think the Fed has weapons that they can use.
But what?
If they want to. They can lower interest rates.
Because you said to me in your last interview with me, you said there's very few tools they have in their toolbox, but interest rates are the main one. Remember that?
Yeah.
So what do they use to offset this?
Well, they can always drop interest rates.
But isn't that counterintuitive to what they just did because of inflation?
Well, actually, it's not. They've been dropping interest rates for the last year.
Correct.
Because they want to drive down inflation. And by raising interest rates, that's a cost to the consumer. That's a cost directly to the consumer. That's inflationary. By lowering interest rates, they actually can lower inflation, because if they go down by a quarter of a point, 25 basis points, that means that the loans that you take out for your car, the loans that you take out for your businesses are going to be cheaper, and you don't have to pass that cost on to the consumer.
Okay, but when inflation went up to 6-7%, whatever the number was, they raised the interest rates to slow down buying.
That's
to
true.
Offset inflation. But I hear what you're saying, that as the cost of these goods go up, you're saying by lowering the rate, it costs them less to buy, so there'll be an offset to some of these.
There'll be an offset, which is why, if you notice, President Trump has asked that the interest rates be dropped.
Yes.
Because he sees that as a balance to his tariffs, because it will lower inflation, not increase inflation on the consumer.
So if you had your script that you would write, starting from today, because of what's going on, and it's right now there's chaos with all of these tariffs, because I don't think anyone really knows in 30 days where we'll be with it. Where do you think this all ends up? If you look, you're bright, you understand the effects. You've got a government, whether you're a Trump fan or not, you have to have people in that government that are saying something smart to somebody. And eventually someone has to listen, because otherwise, if all of these tariffs go into effect, it could be catastrophic to the consumer.
It could be.
So what do you think is the game plan?
Well, I think the game plan, I think we've been able to see it now. Remember what Trump did shortly after he raised the tariffs in his famous speech at the White House. He then came back and said, we're not going to put anything into effect for 90 days. Basically saying you got 90 days to do as much trading as you possibly can with the U.S. in the hopes that that's going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either.
I don't think companies that have invested in Vietnam or in China at this point are going to bring their costs of business back to the U.S., even though it may cost them in the short term tariffs, because, as you said, they're going to raise the cost of that to the ultimate consumer, which is me and you.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see a silver lining. And the silver lining, I think, is as follows. I think Trump basically at this point realizes that 10% is really the max that you can put a tariff in on any country in the U.S. that is trading with us. And that's really, that 10% tariff is what you see on most countries, except for China. China's the only one where we got 125% tariff on. And you saw how they retaliated with a tariff on U.S. goods or goods coming to the U.S. from China, especially rare earth commodities, of 134%. And I think China now thinks that they can outlast the U.S. in any trade war. We'll have to see if that's true. If it is true, then I think Trump will take his cards, fold them, and go home. That's what I suspect.
If Trump, and this is not a political question, do you think, and I understand why he initially did it. He probably felt we're being taken advantage of and we have to do to them what they've been doing to us.
Yes.
Let's assume he believed that. But do you think he became too aggressive too quickly? Because somebody said something very interesting from the Rockefeller Group. They said, the sad part we're facing right now is the United States has to fight 130 countries. These countries only have to fight one country. And we have a big fight to figure out what to do with 130 countries in 90 days. But if he had it to do over again, do you think he would have done it a little less aggressively and pick and choose? As an example, would Canada have been who he should have gone after initially?
No. I don't think he should have gone after China or Mexico. First of all, we have a trade agreement. It's called the North American Trade Association that was actually negotiated by Congress and passed by Congress. So, I happen to think that trade agreement, we may be in violation of our own trade agreement that we propose. And all that China needs to do or Mexico needs to do is go to the right world body and they can probably win the legal argument. So in my judgment, as I'm sure, I don't know who it was that said it at the Rockefeller Group, but I'm sure there are a lot of smart guys there besides you.
I'm not one of them.
I'm sure you are.
There's a lot smarter than me. I want to be the dumbest guy in the room and learn from everybody.
Well,
that's why we're talking today.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I joined DTCC and early on joined Davis Polk and Wardwell. I was not the smartest bulb in the place.
But you learned fast, didn't you?
I did.
See, that country boy did it. It worked, didn't it?
Well, the country boy is a nice little word to have.
It is.
Because people tend to underestimate country boys.
It was very funny. I was watching a movie on television the other night, and this guy was a major corporate powerhouse. And he said, when I went to school, I sat in the last row in the back of the class, and I was quiet, and everyone underestimated me. And look at me today. Sometimes you got to watch these country boys.
Well, that was probably Warren Buffett.
Exactly.
I mean, with a name like Thompson, I always sat in the back.
You always sat in the back.
I always sat in the back, just because of the way it always was. Depending on your last name and whether or not you were an A or B or C, you sat back, right? Well, Thompson meant that I was always in the back row.
Well, I guess Shelley and Shelley was close to Thompson. Neither one of us were up in the front row. No, I was usually in detention quite a bit, so I wasn't even in the class.
Well, remember, you were an English student, so you were never in detention.
But anyway, so...
Anyway, it's Lord Shelley, as I recall.
Lord Shelley, yeah. Oh, yes, Lord Shelley. But it is such a complex world we live in. It's like if we have a cold, the world gets sick.
Well,
I
think the way it's always been said is that if the U.S. catches a cold, the rest of the world catches pneumonia.
Yeah, true.
And that's all we got to do. If we go into a recession, imagine how it's going to affect the rest of the world. Okay. We are the major capitalist country in the world. We are the capital backbone of all of the democratic countries in the world. It's just that simple.
You know, I remember many years ago, and we had talked about this, I worked with a company called London Capital in London for many years way back, and it was about 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But I recall at that time, every week they had a economic meeting of all their investment advisors, but each one represented the Middle East, the Asian countries, the India, America, whatever. And they would all discuss the economies of what's happening in emerging markets, in the whatever, to discuss how each one affected each other. And I found that fascinating because when you came back to this country, we were so focused on the United States only that we disregarded how other countries affect the economy of everybody. They caught it. They realized it way sooner than I think we did, or maybe because they had more international investments.
Well, London has always been a very international country.
Yes.
First of all, its navy was what gave it the great power. And, it's a commonwealth. So it had African countries that spoke English. It had India. It had Hong Kong and Asia, and it had India and Asia, two of the largest economies in the world today. The Indian economy is probably only second or third to the U.S. and China at the moment.
It's amazing, isn't it?
In terms of how powerful it is. It's amazing, and it's going to grow, and it's going to be extremely influential moving forward.
So I have to ask you one more question, because we hear the word recession, obviously depression, which is not the case, but recession. How do you go from, with what's going on now, what takes us from inflation going, possibly increasing, to recession? What happens that causes that, and what actually is a recession when it takes place?
Well, a recession is basically a down period in the overall economy. And, I don't know what the percentage is that'll have to drop by. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%. I would assume that if it drops 10 to 20%, that's a recession.
Yes.
In terms of the marketability of the U.S. So I would think if interest rates begin to go up in any significant way, you're going to see the Fed try to reduce those rates by using a number of the tools that it has in its toolbox. The key one will be dropping interest rates. Dropping the intraday interest rate from right now, they got a average, I think, of around 3.5 to 3%. They'll try to drop that rate to somewhere close to 2% in order to stimulate the economy.
Now, when you say stimulate the economy, which does the gross national product play into this?
Of course it does.
Yeah. So if that were to drop, obviously, that's what we're talking about with the drop in the economy.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of the 10% drop. If you get the U.S. dropping, its GDP dropping by 10%, we're in a recession. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and also, we already agree that if there's a tariff of whatever that number is, and the consumer has to absorb that, he may not absorb it, he may not buy. He may not purchase.
He may not buy, which means that the increase that he's going to receive may be less than what everybody thinks it's going to be. As I said earlier, the fact that you got a 25% tariffs on certain goods coming from other places into the U.S. doesn't mean that the price is going to go up by 25%.
No.
It may only go up by 10%. But at that point, you're going to have to negotiate your deal with whoever you're buying from. So if it's eggs, it's going to be the American farmer, right, trying to sell those eggs to outside. If it's wheat, it's going to be whatever the cost of bread is going to be, because that's what we use predominantly, for building it. If it's going to be phones, especially cell phones, And it's going to be the rare earths that we predominantly get from China. And as I told you, China is now imposing 134% tariffs on all
it would
goods
definitely
coming to the
create a
U.S.
slowdown in the purchasing of these goods.
That's correct.
Because the people are not going to spend it. They may say, instead of buying a new car this year, I'll buy it in 3 years.
Well,
or 2 years.
that means that the value of used cars is going to go up.
That's right. So
you'll make a lot of money, Bob.
on my used cars. I need a paying job, Larry. You understand that?
Well, I thought you had a paying job.
Arleen won't pay me. I'm sorry. You know, I've been asking for a raise for a long time, and I just can't get it
She
from
just
her.
smiled over there.
There you go. But so to sum things up, I mean, look, it's chaotic. We expected it to be chaotic. Hopefully it will level off at some point. But the only last question I have for you is, and you know, people, if they invest in any of these stocks, which most people do, they realize that if a company misses its earnings by pennies, or if the guidance isn't what it should have been, they're brutal to the price of these stocks.
That's correct.
Now,
And they should be.
yeah. So now you have the first quarter of this year coming out in a couple of weeks with earnings. I would have to imagine that the earnings estimates have to be adjusted accordingly for what is going on, because some of these companies can't maintain these profit margins. What do you think?
Well, I was surprised when I saw the banks come out with their earnings, and Citigroup and Bank of America were number 1 and number 2. Citigroup is number 1, shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Because Citigroup has been basically the low bank of all of the large world banks. You know, and the U.S. now has, I think, 4 out of the 10 biggest banks in the world. The other ones being Chinese banks or European banks, such as Deutsche Bank. But you know, Citibank is doing very well. JP Morgan, I suspect, is going to do very well. So I think the U.S. will do very well in the earnings race this year in the first quarter.
What about the technology stocks?
I think the technology stocks are going to take a hit.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, even though the rare earths, they're going to get a break that way, the fact of the matter is people are going to stay away from them because they think they're tainted. And so they're going to stay away. I think the average consumer, if he's got a phone, is not going to buy another phone this year. So Apple's going to take a hit.
That's right.
And NVIDIA is going to probably take a hit. It's already fallen out of the $3 trillion marketplace. Microsoft has replaced Apple as the largest corporation. And I suspect that's going to be...
You ever think you'd hear when you started out in business, a company's worth $1 trillion?
Yeah, I did.
Did you? Amazing.
Yeah.
I find it so... Today, it's no longer a millionaire, it's a billionaire today. It's...
Well, you got... In order to be wealthy, you have to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Now, so I'm poor. I'm only a millionaire.
And a country boy, too. You're a country boy that's worth $1 million.
That's correct.
So the last thing, only because it's a little humor to the whole thing, does Musk go back to running Tesla?
He does. But unfortunately, I think all of his other stocks are going to take a hit. So SpaceX and all of the rest are going to take a hit because he just simply doesn't have the bandwidth to do all of that and to cut, you know, the U.S. government by a few $1 trillion at the same time. I don't think anybody has that.
No.
So, Donald Trump, I think, has gotten the best days that he can get out of Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, unfortunately, has become a symbol of all that's wrong in the administration.
So, in one paragraph, what do we have to look forward to in the next year, in 25?
A lot of, in my judgment,
Yep.
I think inflation is going to go up. I think the 2% target that the Fed has set is now going to become the 3% target. And I think the Fed is going to cut interest rates at least 3 times in the next year.
25%, 25 basis points each one.
75 basis points total.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Okay. And see, you've heard that from a country boy.
You heard it from me.
Right.
And I am indeed a country boy.
That's exactly right. Larry, I can't thank you enough for being with us. It's truly always a pleasure.
Thank you, Bob.
And
It's been a pleasure
I
being
personally look forward to this, not because we're on TV, but I love talking to you. As you know, we're personally friends, and I love the intellect. But what I love about it is you can have somebody from whatever party you talk about. It's not political. We all want the U.S. to survive, to do well, to be successful, and we as consumers enjoy our life.
Well, I think the key is what you just said. We as consumers want the country to do well.
Right.
And we as consumers want our local economies to do well, because then we will do well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what makes America a great country. It gives everybody an opportunity to do well.
And there is sanity in the insanity, someplace.
I think so.
Well, we're going to find out this
I'm
year.
looking for the golden rule.
And what is that?
The golden rule is what goes up has to come down.
And what goes down, hopefully, will go back up.
That's correct.
And with that, thank you so much. We'll be right back. And welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I must tell you, speaking with Larry Thompson is a treat, and I hope he had made some semblance out of what's going on in the economy. As he said, he's a Republican, but this was not politics today. We don't take sides. We are not concerned with the sides of what people believe. This was about what is going on with our economy, how it affects us as consumers, and we wanted to hear his opinions and his thoughts on what is happening. And I think it was very, very enlightening, very bright, and I think we all enjoyed it. So I want to thank you so much. Again, there is so much more happening on the island in the coming 6 months. Please take advantage of it. Please look at the newsletters as they come out. We want you to enjoy your island and have a great time. Right now, it's the holidays. Enjoy. Have a wonderful, wonderful summer. But we will be continue to filming all through the summer to keep you up to date on all of the events and everything that will be happening during the year. Thank you so much and stay healthy.
All right, so here we are. I want to introduce you to Natalia Litardo, if you haven't met her already. She is our events queen, we'll say. Next week, we'll have a tiara for her. So I just wanted to give her a chance to talk about how our season end went. And Natalia, take it away.
Thank you. A lot of hard work, great partnership we saw from all of our departments. Everyone really jumped in to help, from the facilities team to our tennis team, spa, our marketing communications team, food and beverage, culinary. So everyone really put a lot of work into it, not just getting the event going, but getting the whole building and island to operate and ready for 500 plus 600, however many reservations we had. It went well, flawless, I want to say. We're still keep getting feedback. You're getting reviews.
Wonderful, wonderful feedback.
Everyone raving, so excited from every element and aspect, from the arrival experience, all the multiple departments helping out with check-in and greeting people, our paparazzi, our head paparazzi.
We have over 3,000 photos, so we'll put those up as soon as we get them all, on our Flickr account. But yes, a lot of pictures.
And it was flawless. So we got to showcase really what we're going to be offering here once we're fully open. We had some menu items from the restaurant, the Oleo restaurant that we're in right now, from the Last Coconut, which is a pool, kitchen, and bar, and also our banquet offerings. And you got to taste and sample things from the food menu and also the beverage menu from outside, inside here in the restaurant, as well as a banquet space. So really got to see it in all its glory and everything that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event. People were just, even at the event, we were kind of mingling amongst everybody, and even after, like during the event, people were just like raving nonstop. And as you can see, this will be Olia, which is going to be our signature restaurant, and you can see it's just stunning. It's absolutely a stunning space. We got to showcase our palm deck and the King Ballroom and our beautiful pool. So soon it'll be open in the next few weeks.
Yes.
And you'll all have an opportunity to see it for yourselves. So we're gonna have a little sneak peek for you also in this video. So just stay tuned for it, don't go away. We also, in this really beautiful place, we had our Passover Seder here. And we're also going to have Easter.
We kicked off last week on Wednesday with a big grand toast and taste event here on the island where everyone finally got to see the venue. But then we rolled right into Passover Seder on Saturday, a little under 160 people here, being able to see the full venue and its glory, doing a plated dinner. Then this week we're ramping up. It's Easter on Sunday. We will be having the brunch over here. So we're going to be utilizing the ballroom outside in the palm deck as well. So you can be able to see what that would look like for a banquet buffet if you're ever interested in joining us for an event over here. And then shortly after, we're going to kick it off and start getting everything ready, shifting gears to open up the last coconut. So it's just one thing after the next, making sure we're ready for you.
Why don't you mention to everybody about if they're interested in having an event here, what is the process to kind of rent the room?
That's a great question. So we actually have on our club calendar an option for you to fill out and submit the contact form for events. So it's going to ask you some basic questions. What date are you looking for? How many people are you interested in having, and what time frame, which gives us a better idea of what we have available. And if we have availability, we can already jump in there and start sharing menus and such. If you're not sure how to locate that, you could call our reservations team. They can either guide you how to find that form online, or they could just get that information and fill it out for you, which sends it over to the other side where we're going to be able to get all of the details here for you, reach out, menus, just give you a follow-up with everything that we can.
Yeah, and we're trying to streamline it so it's not only extremely easy for you, but it's extremely easy for us. So when you fill out that form, you'll have a better idea of what they're looking for. If it's a wedding or a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, you can already have some information for them ahead of time.
Maybe for direction of whether it's menus or, any other additional requests that we can be able to potentially get for you and just help the process move along. So that's going to be the best way. You can definitely reach out to us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's going to be an exciting time for all of us. And we look forward to, more and more events here. It's going to be a spectacular place to just come together as a community. Williams Island is where luxury meets community.
Yes.